Hello, friends, and welcome back to another wonderful edition of A New Way to Museum. I'm your host for the day, Curtis Schmidt, the Zoological Collections Manager, and we are actually in the collections right now. And one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today are birds of prey. So what exactly is a bird of prey? That's a great question. And the easiest way that I can describe what that is birds of prey typically have hooked beaks and sharp talons or claws. So they use these talons and claws to grab their prey, and then they use that sharp beak to tear apart and eat their prey. So I'm going to go through some of the ones that are more common in this area here in western Kansas and talk about each individual species a little bit. So this one is not in this area right now at the middle of April, but will soon be in this area. This is a Mississippi kite. So this is one of the migratory species that spends its summers here and breeds here. But once it starts to get cold, they go way south. So they go way down into South America. So that is the Mississippi kite, and a very, very beautiful bird. Kind of the slate gray. Sometimes they're even a little lighter than this. So like I mentioned, they do breed here in the summertime. They have very strong bonds with their mates. And along with that, they are very aggressive in defending their nests. So I actually know people that have actually been dive bombed and hit with those talons on the top of their head, getting too close to the nests without even realizing it. So very, very territorial and very protective birds, but beautiful birds nonetheless. The next two are birds that are common in this area all year long, and they're very difficult to tell apart from one another. The biggest way is by size, but when you're looking at a bird and you don't have two birds to compare side by side, it's hard to judge how big they are. So that is the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk. So if you look at them, they look very, very similar. One of the key characters that you can tell that's not always the easiest to see either is if you look at the tails. The sharp-shinned hawk has a rectangular tail, a flattened tail. The Cooper's hawk has a rounded tail. So the way that I remember that is Cooper's, round. But again, you're not always going to see that. These are two species of birds that really, really love to hide in the trees. The only time you typically see them is when they come out to attack their primary food source, which is other birds. So these are actually predators on other smaller bird species. So usually you just see them as they dart out of the bushes, dart out of the trees, and go and attack a bird at a bird feeder. So in town like this, these things are seen rather routinely at people's bird feeders. And then they'll grab the bird, they'll pluck out the feathers, they'll eat what they need to eat, and then they'll move on. So really, really cool predators. Unfortunately, they're predators at bird feeders, and a lot of people don't like that because they're feeding the birds. So then we move on to the bigger species of hawks. So this one here is a migratory species, and a lot of these species can be really, really difficult to tell apart as well. There's lots of very intricate details that help distinguish one species from another, and there's a lot of variation within each species as well, so it can be very, very difficult. But this species in general, it's a smaller buteo, which is the genus of this group, and the buteos typically are heavy-bodied, bigger hawks. So this is a Swansons Hawk, one of the smaller buteos, and you can always tell a Swansons Hawk because it's got a dark bib. So that right there is always going to be dark for the most part. So these are very migratory, and it's really neat because they actually migrate in flocks, big flocks. So you can see flocks of these migrating through of 200, 300 individuals, which for hawks is kind of unique. There's not a whole lot of hawks that migrate in flocks, so that's one of them. And we do have these here during the summer, but during the winter they're gone. The most common by far species that we have in this area is the red-tailed hawk. Now, not all red-tailed hawks have the nice, distinguishable red tail. The females don't. The juveniles definitely don't. But the biggest thing, and this is an extremely variable hawk as well, but almost always they will have some type of banding that goes across the breast. So we call it, like a belt, basically, that goes around their waist. But very, very common, especially in the winter. You can drive down the highway and see hundreds of these things in 100 miles. They're just sitting around waiting to find food and waiting for their next meal, basically. So very, very common bird. Now I'm going to get into a couple of the falcon species. This one is also commonly known as a sparrowhawk or even a chicken hawk, because like the sharpshin and the Cooper's hawk, they love to eat other little birds. So beautiful little falcon, and very common in this area year-round. This is called the American Kestrel. This is a male. The males are very, very colorful, nice and bluish gray, nice rusty color. Really pretty face. I can always tell a falcon because it looks like it's got a teardrop coming down from its eye. So again, they are birds of prey, so they've got that hooked beak, and then they've got nice talons. So beautiful little guys. And then another one that's common in this area as well, more common in the winter, is the Prairie Falcon. So again, you can see that teardrop coming down from the front of the eye, but a lot less colorful. These guys really aren't that colorful. And it's a big falcon, so this is a pretty good sized falcon. So you're seeing a lot of similarities between these species. So again, lots of subtle differences. Amateur ornithologists like myself aren't always very good at identifying all these things, but the good thing is there's excellent resources out there and field guides that specialize on hawks or shorebirds or things like that. So the next group I'm going to show you are the owls, which is another group of birds of prey. So again, they're going to have those same characters, but owls have a few different characters as well, which make them owls. So basically, they have huge eyes that are not movable. So in order to see in different directions, they have to be able to swivel their head all the way around. So they can make a complete 180 with their head to look around. Fascinating. And also, most of them have feathers that go all the way down to the claws. So even their feet and the tarsi, which is the bone just above the feet, are feathered. So this one here is a short-eared owl. And when we think of owls, we typically think of nocturnal predators. They're hunting at night. They come out at night. The short-eared owl is actually a daytime hunter. So it's out during the day. This is one of them that's most commonly seen in this area, especially during the daytime. Lots of people are probably familiar with this guy, the barn owl, which is a really weird-looking owl. They kind of got a weird monkey face to them, I like to say. But these guys are found in barns, in buildings, under bridges, all over the place, wherever there's human habitation. And a really neat thing about them is this is one of the few bird species that's found throughout the world. So on every single continent, I think except for Antarctica, you can find barn owls. So they're kind of unique in the way that they look in their coloration. Again, they have feathers that go down. They don't have feathers on their feet, though. So just on the tarsi, but not all the way down to the feet. And I'm going to tell you what, when you find a nest of these things, the young ones are about as ugly as you can imagine. They hiss at you, they squawk at you, they're really upset, and they are ugly. They are the thing of nightmares. Anyway, I digress. So the most common species that we have in this area throughout Kansas is the great horned owl. And I'm sure you guys have at least heard these, if not seen them before. So I actually have one of these living in my neighbor's backyard, which is unfortunate because I hear it every single night. But you hear them, they're great hunters. Again, they're feathered all the way down to the feet. Very, very cool animals, and they're called great horned owls because when they're not stuffed like this, they've got tufts on their ears that stand up and look kind of like horns, if you can use your imagination. This one, this last owl I'm going to show you, is probably my favorite owl, and historically they did not range this far south into Kansas, but they are now. Every single winter, these guys get pushed down from the Arctic, and they make it through Kansas. And it's usually the young ones, and they're usually following the food sources. So they eat things like voles and, I'm not remembering the word for it right now, but things that are very similar to voles. And so when there's a big population boom of those voles, these guys will move south along with those populations. The young ones generally do. So this is called a snowy owl. And you're more familiar with this because of, what's the show? Harry Potter. Yes. So I can tell this is actually a juvenile one, which is, again, most of what we find in Kansas are juveniles because it's very heavily speckled. So it's got lots of brown on it, not a whole lot of white. But really, really neat animals, and they are becoming more and more common every winter here in Kansas. Now this guy right here, this is interesting because everybody's seen these, everybody knows what these are, with the naked head and the hooked beak. But these are not considered they are considered birds of prey, but they're not predators. These are actually scavengers. This is a turkey vulture, a very migratory species. They're all over the place right now as they're migrating through. They will hang out during the summer as well. But they were long thought to be very closely related to the old world vultures. So the vultures that live in Africa and Asia, because they have the same life history. They look very similar. They eat the same things. They eat carrion. But it wasn't until recent research that showed that these are actually more closely related to the hawks and the falcons than they are to the old world vultures. So we call that convergent evolution, which is where two unrelated things evolve to have the same characters and the same lifestyle because they just live in the areas where they can do that, where that niche is open. So basically, even though they look just like the ones over there, they act just like the ones over there, they're more closely related to our hawks than they are to the vultures over there. So very, very fascinating there. So now I'm going to ask you to bear with me because these things are really, really big. So the group that we're missing so far are the eagles. So eagles obviously are birds of prey, giant birds of prey. But what a lot of people don't realize is they're very similar to vultures in that they actually prefer to feed on carrion. So things that are already dead. They don't prefer to actually catch their food live, although they've got wonderful talons for grabbing things and catching fish, things like that. So this one here is actually a juvenile bald eagle. When I ask people a lot of times, what is this bird? The first thing they think of is golden eagle. Why? Because bald eagles obviously have a white head and a white tail. Well, the juveniles will not get that coloration until their third year. So 2.5 to 3 years, they will look just like a golden eagle until they molt and they get their adult colors that you're really used to seeing. So I do have a golden eagle to show you the main difference. So very, very similar if you look at this side. But if you look behind the head, this is where they get the name golden eagle. You see the golden feathers behind the head. So you noticed on the last one, the bald eagle did not have that. These guys do. Even the young ones will have that nice golden hue. Both of these are found in Kansas. The bald eagle is found throughout the state of Kansas and is becoming very, very abundant. This one's much less common and most likely to be found in western Kansas. So there is your introduction to birds of prey. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. Please like us, share us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us in a new way to museum with the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for notifications when we release a new video. Support us on Patreon for early access and exclusive content. You can also follow us on all our social media. Links are found in the description. Thanks for watching, and follow your curiosity to new discoveries.